in this module, I want to talk about the theory behind enumeration. And now in the previous module, scanning, we basically only wanted to find out if a target was on or off, or the ports were open or closed. We only wanted some basic information. Port scans, vulnerability scans, and things like that. But in enumeration, what we're really asking here is, can I have more? And it's highly targeted. Okay, so let's look at this. The principle that's involved is still confidentiality oriented or disclosure oriented. Notice we still haven't changed the integrity of our target yet. We're going to get there, but most of the life cycle of penetration testing is what information is available to me, documenting that, and how can I combine all of that like a puzzle and ultimately form the actual attack. So we're getting real close to penetrating a system, but we're not there yet. So let's look at enumeration. Obviously, you're going to be running some tools against the target. So between you and your target, once you reach out and you talk to this target using your tools, what information is available to us, or what would we be interested in? Well, the first thing, and this can be in no particular order here, but the first thing is what layer 2 or layer 3 information, because most of this we've probably already got from the scanning section. So what routing tables, how does the routing table look? How do the ARP tables look? So a few of the tools will disclose that type of information. Also, on our target, what users, groups, or accounts are available? Can I start enumerating lists of those? I mean, if I could reach out to Active Directory and pull a list of all user accounts, that's a treasure trove of information. Or what if it's not connected to Active Directory? What if it's a standalone system? Or what if it's a Unix system? Or is it even tied together at all? Right? So the result of users, groups, and accounts, that tells you the makeup of realistically how your target is connected to the rest of the network. Speaking of that, network resources. Okay, are there any printers connected? Anything related to networking protocols specifically, like TCP/IP, NetBIOS, server message block, any of that stuff, all very, very valid, which spins directly into services. So think of going to a client machine and looking at the particular services that perhaps Windows is running or Unix is running. If we can enumerate that list, that maps out the surface area of attack, or potentially doors to get into our target. Also, what names or naming conventions do they use? Is it a DNS name? Is it a NetBIOS name? Is there no name resolution? Can you only talk to it with TCP/IP? Or maybe it's a router that doesn't use a naming convention. All of this starts to paint the picture of what exactly our target looks like. Then we can go even more in detail and say, well, if we know these services and the ports and the protocols, well, can we get even more information by connecting to the application and pulling some of the application code or the application banners? So that's very, very important as well. And then, of course, at this point, you could start getting passwords. That makes the next part of the penetration test really, really easy, because you're halfway to getting to access the system with a username. If you could get a password at this stage, great. That would be considered the holy grail, and boom, you're in. And this is where things like a null session come into play. All right. Also, high level, what type of operating system are we attacking? Is it a Windows, Linux, Mac? Is it a networking operating system like a router or firewall or whatever web interface we can connect to of that type of operating system? All right, so that's a little bit of theory on what you're going after when you talk about the target. Next, I want to talk about how do we connect to this target, and that's where our ports and our protocols come into play. Okay, let's just do the whole thing first. NetBIOS, Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, LDAP or Active Directory, Network Timing Protocol, Server Message Block, and DNS. And Simple Network Management Protocol. All of these together are the basics here. Now remember, there's how many ports? Right? We have up to 65,000 ports in which we can connect to. That's a lot of services. But your 80-20 rule tells us that only a handful of them are going to give us the most information. So this is where we start, because these tend to be the most rewarding in terms of time versus effort. Okay? So NetBIOS, typically only on a Windows system, and there are a handful of systems that still use this. This is a much older protocol, but if we can connect to it and speak the language of NetBIOS, we can get lots of good information here. Mail. A lot of systems use mail, whether it be email between users or perhaps replicating directory information. SMTP can work there as well. If there is a directory, what can we get from that directory? And this is where any sort of directory protocol would be fair game. The common ones are LDAP and Active Directory, but remember there's others. You have Novell directory services, or anything that ends in directory services would be fair game under that category. Timing. Is there a timing component? Server message block, very similar to NetBIOS, but nonetheless it's different, and the exploits are, I would consider it in a separate category as well. DNS, this is a little bit more name resolution oriented, which would kind of map to our component of, naming and how do we connect to it, but nonetheless you can get lots of really good information, especially if Active Directory, which would be an internal directory structure, is integrated into an external DNS. If those two talk to each other, Pandora's box opens wide open. All right, so you must master tools like NSLOOKUP and DIG. All right. Also, with Simple Network Management Protocol, this is also a treasure trove of information, because if you can connect using the default public and private community strings, man, you can get a wealth of information, and in many cases even go into full-blown administration of a network appliance. And we use a management information-based browser. The best way to describe a MIB browser is think a web browser to connect to networking resources, and there's plenty of ones that we'll look at. And then you can summarize all of the protocols with, well, what ports do they respectively talk on. Now I've listed a few here, but it's certainly not limited to this. This is where your typical system administrator tends to break down in the subject of penetration testing, because they may know a few ports and protocols, but the goal of ethical hacking is to be able to find all ports and protocols, quickly look those up, and be able to do something with them. So your common ones, this is where you can play quiz to yourself here. What is port 53? If you were thinking DNS, you're right on. When do we use ports 135, 137, 139, 445? Those are common Windows-oriented ports. Or ports 161 and 162 for Simple Network Management Protocol. Or 3368 for Global Catalog Services. Or 389 for LDAP. Or 3389 for Remote Desktop. And again, there's plenty of derivatives. So if the 3389 for Remote Desktop's not open, what about other ports like VNC and things like that? Okay, so let's take a step back and let's summarize before we get into the hands-on labs. We're still focusing on confidentiality. We're going to get ready to go change the integrity of our systems coming up here, which is often considered the hack. So between us and our target, we look at routing tables, users, groups, accounts, networking resources, services, names, application banners, and passwords. We want to find out as much as we can about our operating system, and we can attack any protocol or port that is available to us. But now, in the context of enumeration, remember, we want more. We should have enough information at this point to start really getting into how the system is vulnerable, what is offered to us, and how do we actually exploit that target system. Are conventional exploits going to work? Maybe something like Metasploit? Or do we have to go into unconventional methods like social engineering, shoulder surfing, and dumpster diving? All right, so let's go ahead and get started with some hands-on examples.